The transport ship landed at Harmony 7 station with a soft hiss. Jiwon stepped out of the airlock, carrying a simple bag over his shoulder. He looked around the busy docking bay with curious eyes. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved through the area. Some had 4 arms. Others had crystal skin that sparkled under the lights. A few floated in the air without touching the ground. Jiwon smiled and walked toward the information desk. The being behind the counter had blue skin and 3 eyes. She looked up at him with surprise. "You must be the human exchange student," she said in a soft voice. Her translator device made her words easy to understand. "I am Nira. Welcome to Galactic Academy." "Thank you," Jiwon replied. His voice was calm and friendly. "I'm excited to be here." Nira handed him a data pad with his room assignment and class schedule. "Your dormitory is in Section C. The orientation meeting starts in 2 hours. Jiwon nodded and picked up his bag. As he walked through the station corridors, other students stopped to stare at him. They whispered to each other in their own languages. Some pointed at him when they thought he wasn't looking. He found his room easily. It was small but comfortable, with a bed, desk, and storage unit. The window showed a view of space with distant stars. Jiwon unpacked his few belongings and checked his class schedule. His first class was xenobiology with Professor Veltar. Later, at the orientation meeting, Jiwon sat in the back row of a large auditorium. The room was filled with students from many different worlds. Dean Corval, a tall being with gray skin and long fingers, stood at the front. "Students, this year we have our first human exchange student," the dean announced. "Jiwon comes from the planet Earth. Please make him feel welcome." All eyes turned to Jiwon. He stood up and waved with a gentle smile. "Hello, everyone. I look forward to learning with you." The dean continued talking about academy rules and expectations. Jiwon listened carefully, but he also watched the other students. He noticed how they moved, how they breathed, how they reacted to different sounds. His eyes tracked everything without seeming to stare. After the meeting, a student approached him. The alien had green skin and large, bright eyes. "Hi, I'm Minho," he said. "I'm from Velkar Prime. You want to get some food?" "Sure," Jiwon replied. "I'd like that." They walked to the station's food court together. Minho talked about his home planet and his studies. He seemed genuinely interested in meeting. "Jiwon, so what's Earth like?" Minho asked as they sat down with their meals. Jiwon thought for a moment. "It's a nice place. Lots of different animals and plants. The weather changes a lot." "What kind of animals?" asked another voice. A small, bird-like student with silver feathers had joined them. "I'm Sora, from Trilla." "Oh, all kinds," Jiwon said casually. "We have big cats that hunt in groups, bears that can break trees with their paws, sharks that live in the water and can smell blood from far away, spiders with poison that can kill you in minutes. Pretty normal stuff." Minho and Sora exchanged glances. "That sounds dangerous," Sora said quietly. Jiwon laughed. "Not really. You just have to be careful. Most of them won't bother you if you leave them alone." Sora shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Something about the way Jiwon talked about these deadly creatures seemed strange. He spoke about them like they were pets, not threats. More students joined their table. Hyon, a student with crystal-like skin that changed colors, sat across from Jiwon. "I heard Earth is classified as a death world," Hyan said in a logical tone. Deathworld? Jiwon raised an eyebrow. That seems a bit dramatic. Sure, we have. Some natural disasters sometimes. Earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanoes. But every planet has those, right? The other student stared at him. Most of their home planets were peaceful places with stable weather and few dangerous animals. Volcanoes? Minho asked. Like mountains that explode with fire? Well, with lava, Ji-won corrected. The fire comes from the hot rock. They don't explode very often. And most people don't live too close to them. As Ji-won spoke, Sora noticed something odd about him. He sat very still, but his eyes never stopped moving. They tracked every person who walked by their table. When someone dropped a food container across the room, his head turned toward the sound instantly. Then he went back to smiling and talking as if nothing had happened. What do humans do for fun? Yan asked. Lots of things, Ji-won said. Some people like to run very long distances. Others climb up the sides of mountains with just ropes. Some go swimming with sharks. There's a sport where people jump out of flying vehicles with just a piece of cloth to slow them down. The table went quiet. These activities sounded like suicide to most of the alien students. Don't you get scared? Sora asked in a small voice. Ji-won tilted his head, thinking. I guess humans don't scare as easily as some species. We're used to a little danger. Minho noticed that when Ji-won walked, his feet made almost no sound. Even on the metal floors of the station, he moved quietly. Other students' footsteps echoed, but Ji-won seemed to glide across the ground. Later that evening, Ji-won went to his first xenobiology class. Professor Veltar was a tall, thin being with purple skin and 4 arms. The classroom was filled with about 20 students from different planets. Welcome to xenobiology, Professor Veltar announced. This semester we will study the most dangerous predators from across the galaxy. Next week, I will bring in a special guest, a live Korthak shadow stalker. Several students gasped. Some looked excited. Others appeared nervous. Don't worry, the professor continued. It will be safely contained. This will be an excellent opportunity to observe a true apex predator in action. Ji-won leaned forward slightly, his eyes bright, with interest. He pulled out a notebook and wrote down Korthak Shadow Stalker at the top of a page. The rest of the class was about basic predator behavior. Professor Veltar explained how different species developed hunting strategies. Some used poison, others used speed or strength. Some hunted alone, others in groups. Ji-won took careful notes. He asked thoughtful questions about hunting patterns and prey behavior. His questions were so detailed that the professor seemed impressed. You seem to know quite a bit about predator behavior, Professor Veltar observed. Just curious, Ji-won replied with his usual calm smile. After class, Minho walked with Ji-won back to the dormitory. You really seem interested in predators, Minho said. All biology is interesting, Ji-won answered. Understanding how different species survive and adapt is fascinating. That night, Sora couldn't sleep well. Something about the human student bothered her. Her species was naturally empathic, able to sense emotions and intentions from other beings. But when she tried to read Ji-won, she felt something that made her uncomfortable. It wasn't evil or bad, but it was something powerful and controlled. Like a sleeping volcano that could wake up at any time. She told herself she was being silly. Ji-won seemed nice and friendly, but her instincts kept telling her that there was much more to the human than what he showed on the surface. Meanwhile, Ji-won lay in his bed, looking out at the stars. He thought about home and wondered what his classmates would think when they met a real predator next week. He had a feeling it would be very educational for everyone involved. The week passed quickly for most students, but slowly for others. Sora found herself watching Ji-won during meals and in classes. The human was always polite and friendly, but something about him made her nervous. She couldn't explain why. Minho, on the other hand, enjoyed having Ji-won as a friend. The human was easy to talk to and seemed genuinely interested in learning about other cultures. But Minho did notice strange things about his new friend. Ji-won never seemed surprised by anything. When other students jumped at loud noises, Ji-won just turned his head calmly toward the sound. When someone accidentally bumped into him, Ji-won moved out of the way before the collision happened, as if he had sensed it coming. On the day before the special xenobiology class, the station's security chief arrived at the academy. Yuna was a massive Gorvani, standing nearly 3 meters tall with thick gray skin and powerful muscles. She came to oversee the arrival of the Korthak Shadowstalker. "This creature is extremely dangerous," Yuna announced to Professor Veltar and the academy staff. "My team will maintain full security protocols at all times." The professor nodded seriously. "I understand the risks, but this is a rare educational opportunity. How often do we get to observe a living apex predator from Kortheta?" "Never, if we're smart," Yuna muttered under her breath. The transport arrived early in the morning. Ji-won was eating breakfast in the food court when he heard the announcement over the station's communication system. "Attention all students and staff. A dangerous biological specimen is being transferred to the xenobiology lab. Please avoid Section D until further notice." Ji-won looked up from his meal. Several other students at nearby tables were talking excitedly about the Shadowstalker's arrival. Some seemed thrilled, others were worried. "I heard it killed an entire research team on Kortheta," said a student with tentacles instead of arms. "My cousin works in shipping," added another. "He said they needed 3 transport ships just to carry the containment unit." Ji-won finished his breakfast and walked towards Section D. He wasn't planning to interfere, just curious to see how they handled such a dangerous creature. As he got closer, he could hear voices and the sound of heavy equipment being moved. "Careful. With that power coupling," Yuna's voice boomed, "if the containment field fails, we're all dead." Through a window, Ji-won could see into the lab. A massive metal container sat in the center of the room, connected to dozens of cables and monitoring devices. The container was 3 meters long and 2 meters wide, with thick walls that looked like they could stop a missile. Professor Veltar stood nearby, checking readings on various instruments. Several security guards in heavy armor positioned themselves around the room. Yuna supervised everything with stern attention. "The creature is still sedated from transport," one of the guards reported. "But the drugs will wear off in about an hour." "Good," Professor Veltar said. "That gives us time to run final system checks." Ji-won watched for a few more minutes, then went to his morning classes. During lunch, he sat with Minho, Sora, and Hyan as usual. The conversation was all about the upcoming demonstration. "I can't believe we're going to see a real Shadowstalker," Minho said excitedly. "They're supposed to be perfect killing machines." "I'm not sure I want to see it," Sora admitted. "What if something goes wrong?" Hyan, always logical, calculated the odds. The containment systems are designed to hold creatures much stronger than a Shadowstalker. The probability of escape is less than 0.3%. "That's still not zero," Sora pointed out. Ji-won listened to their conversation while eating his lunch. He seemed calm, as always, but his eyes had a distant look. as if he was thinking about something else. "What do you think, Jiwon?" Minho asked. "Are you excited about tomorrow's class?" "It should be interesting," Jiwon replied. "I've never seen a Korthak before. I'm curious about their hunting behavior." That afternoon, Jiwon had a medical examination with Dai, a student who was training to be a doctor. All exchange students needed regular health checks to make sure they were adjusting well to station life. Day was a cautious being with pale blue skin and large, gentle eyes. As he ran various scans on Jiwon, he noticed some unusual readings. "Your heart rate is very slow," Day observed. "Are you feeling okay?" "I feel fine," Jiwon said. "Humans have naturally slow heart rates when we're relaxed." Day checked his medical database. "It says here that the average human heart rate is 60 to 100 beats per minute. Yours is 45. "I exercise a lot," Jiwon explained. "Athletes usually have slower heart rates." Day nodded, but he made a note in Jiwon's file. The human's blood pressure was also unusually low, and his reflexes were extremely fast. When Day tested Jiwon's reaction time, the human's responses were so quick that Day had to run the test 3 times to make sure the equipment was working correctly. "Have you always had such fast reflexes?" Day asked. "I guess so," Jiwon said with a shrug. "I never really thought about it." That evening, Professor Veltar held a brief meeting for all students who would attend tomorrow's demonstration. About 30 students gathered in a small auditorium, including Jiwon and his friends. "Tomorrow you will witness something extraordinary," the professor began. "The Korthak Shadow Stalker is considered one of the most efficient predators in the known galaxy. It has hunted entire species to extinction on its home moon." Several students shifted nervously in their seats. Sora moved closer to Minho. "The creature possesses several remarkable abilities," Professor Veltar continued. "Perfect camouflage that makes it nearly invisible. Paralyzing venom delivered through retractable claws. And most importantly, the ability to project fear directly into the minds of its prey." A student raised her hand. "Project Fear?" "Yes," the professor nodded. "The Shadow Stalker can make its victims feel overwhelming terror even before they see it. This psychological attack often leaves prey paralyzed, with fright, unable to run or fight back." More students looked uncomfortable. Some whispered to each other about whether they really wanted to attend the demonstration. "Don't worry," Professor Veltar assured them. "The containment field will protect us completely. The creature cannot escape, and its fear projection cannot pass through the barrier." Jiwon sat quietly in the back row, taking notes. His expression was interested but not worried. While other students asked questions about safety procedures, Jiwon's questions were about the creature's hunting patterns and social behavior. "Do they hunt in packs?" Jiwon asked. "No, they are solitary hunters," the professor replied. "Each Shadow Stalker controls a large territory and kills any others of its kind that enter." "How do they choose their prey?" "They prefer intelligent prey that can feel fear. The terror response actually makes the meat taste better to them." Several students made disgusted sounds. Jiwon just nodded and wrote more notes. After the meeting, Ryan, a brave student from Voltar, approached Professor Veltar. "Sir, could I volunteer to help with the demonstration? Maybe stand closer to show how the containment works?" "That's very brave of you, Ryan," the professor said. "We'll see how the creature behaves first." As students left the auditorium, Sora noticed that Jiwon was walking differently. His steps were even more silent than usual, and he seemed to be moving with more purpose. When someone accidentally bumped into him, Ji-won's reaction was lightning fast. He stepped aside and steadied the other student before they could fall, all in one smooth motion. "Did you see that?" Sora whispered to Minho. "See what?" "How fast Ji-won moved just now." Minho looked back at Ji-won, who was calmly walking toward the dormitory. "He's always been quick. So what?" But Sora's empathic senses were picking up something new from the human. The controlled power she had felt before was stronger now, closer to the surface. It was like sensing a predator that had caught the scent of prey. That night, Yuna made final preparations for the demonstration. She posted extra guards around the lab and double-checked all the containment systems. The Shadow Stalker had woken up from its sedation and was moving around in its container, but the sensors couldn't get a clear view because of its camouflage abilities. "Remind me why we're doing this," one of the guards muttered. "Education," Yuna replied grimly. "Though, I think some lessons are better left unlearned." In his room, Ji-won sat by the window, looking out at the stars. His breathing was slow and controlled. His pupils were dilated slightly, even though the room was well lit. If anyone had been watching closely, they might have noticed that he wasn't blinking as often as usual. Tomorrow would indeed be educational for everyone involved. The xenobiology lab was packed with students when class began. Professor Veltar had rearranged the seating so everyone could see the containment unit clearly. The massive metal container sat in the center of the room, surrounded by energy barriers and monitoring equipment. Red warning lights blinked steadily around its base. Yuna stood near the back of the room with two armed guards. Her hand rested casually on her weapon, and her eyes constantly scanned the room for any signs of trouble. She had seen too many safe demonstrations go wrong to trust completely in the containment systems. Ji-won took a seat in the third row next to Minho and Sora. His notebook was open, and he had already written several questions at the top of the page. Unlike many other students who looked nervous or excited, Ji-won appeared completely calm. His breathing was steady, and his posture was relaxed. "Good morning, class," Professor Veltar announced. "Today you will observe one of nature's most perfect predators. Before we begin, I want to review the safety protocols one more time." The professor pointed to the various emergency exits and explained the alarm signals. He showed the students where the emergency barriers would deploy if needed, and where they should go if evacuation became necessary. "The containment field is powered by 3 independent energy sources," he explained. "Even if 2 systems fail, the third will maintain the barrier. The creature cannot escape." Several students nodded, looking somewhat reassured. Sora, however, noticed that her empathic senses were picking up fear from almost everyone in the room. Everyone except Ji-won. From the human, she sensed only intense focus and something else she couldn't identify. It felt like hunger, but not for food. "Now," Professor Veltar continued, "let me activate the viewing field." He pressed a series of buttons on his control panel. The metal walls of the container became transparent, revealing the space inside. At first, the students couldn't see anything except some scattered bones and what looked like empty air. "Where is it?" asked Ryan, the Voltar student who had volunteered to help. "Watch carefully," the professor said. "The Shadow Stalker's camouflage is nearly perfect." Suddenly, a section of empty air shimmered, and the creature became visible. The students gasped. The Korthak Shadow Stalker was 3 meters long and covered in smooth black scales that seemed to absorb light. It had 6 legs ending in razor-sharp claws, and its head was dominated by rows of needle-like teeth. Its eyes glowed with a cold, yellow light. Several students immediately felt afraid, even though the creature was safely contained. 3 students, in the front row, stood up and moved toward the back of the room. One student from a particularly peaceful world fainted and had to be helped outside by Day. "What you're feeling is the creature's fear projection," Professor Veltar explained. "Even through the containment field, some of its psychic influence can reach you. This is normal. Try to observe your own reactions as part of the learning experience." The Shadow Stalker moved with liquid grace around its container. It seemed to be studying the students just as much as they were studying it. Its glowing eyes focused on different individuals, and when it looked directly at someone, that person felt a wave of terror wash over them. Minho gripped his desk tightly when the creature's gaze fell on him. "I can feel it in my head," he whispered. "It's like it's telling me I'm going to die." Sora was shaking when the Shadow Stalker looked at her. Her empathic abilities made her even more sensitive to the creature's fear projection. She felt like a small animal being stalked by something infinitely more dangerous than herself. But when the creature's yellow eyes turned toward Jiwon, something unexpected happened. The human met its gaze directly, without flinching or looking away. For a moment, the 2 predators stared at each other through the containment field. "Fascinating," Professor Veltar observed. "Notice how the creature is reacting to different species. It seems to recognize which students would be easier prey." The Shadow Stalker demonstrated its camouflage abilities, vanishing and reappearing in different parts of its container. Each time it materialized, students jumped or cried out in surprise. The creature seemed to enjoy their reactions, making low sounds that might have been laughter. "In the wild," the professor explained, "a Shadow Stalker will stalk its prey for days or even weeks. It uses its fear projection to keep the victim in a state of constant terror, never allowing them to rest or think clearly. Eventually, the prey becomes so exhausted and frightened that it can no longer run or fight." Ryan raised his hand. "Professor, you said I could help demonstrate the containment field. Is it safe for me to get closer?" Professor Veltar checked his instruments. "Yes, the barrier is holding perfectly. Come forward slowly." Ryan stood up and walked toward the container. As he got closer, the fear projection became stronger. His steps became unsteady, and sweat began to form on his forehead. The Shadow Stalker immediately focused all its attention on him, pressing against the side of the container closest to the approaching student. "You can feel its hunger," Ryan said, his voice shaking. It wants to hunt me." "Excellent observation," the professor said. "Notice how the creature's behavior changes when potential prey comes closer. The fear projection intensifies, and its body language becomes more aggressive." The Shadow Stalker began making clicking sounds with its claws against the container walls. Its tail, which ended in a venomous stinger, curved over its back like a scorpion's. The creature's whole body seemed to vibrate with predatory excitement. Ryan tried to take another step forward, but the fear was too strong. "I can't," he said, backing away quickly. "It feels like my brain is screaming at me to run." "That's a completely normal reaction," Professor Veltar assured him. "The fear response is an important survival mechanism. It's kept your species alive for millions of years." As Ryan returned to his seat, the Shadow Stalker continued to pace around its container. It seemed frustrated that its prey had escaped, even though it had never really been in danger. The creature's movements became more agitated, and it began testing different sections of the containment field. "Is it trying to escape?" asked Hyan, his crystal skin flickering with nervous colors. "No," the professor replied. It's exploring its environment, looking for weaknesses. This is typical predator behavior. They never stop searching for opportunities. Ji-won raised his hand. How does it choose which prey to focus on first when there are multiple targets? Excellent question, Professor Veltar said. Shadowstalkers typically select the weakest or most fearful prey first. They can sense emotions and physical condition from a considerable distance. The creature had been moving randomly around its container, but now it began to move in a more deliberate pattern. Its yellow eyes swept across the students systematically, as if it was evaluating each one. When it looked at the more nervous students, it lingered longer, making that clicking sound with its claws. But when its gaze reached Ji-won again, something changed. The creature stopped moving entirely, its head tilted slightly, like a dog hearing a strange sound. The clicking stopped, and for the first time since the demonstration began, the Shadowstalker appeared uncertain. Interesting, Professor Veltar murmured, checking his readings. The creature's behavior is changing. Other students began to notice as well. The overwhelming sense of fear that had filled the room was fading slightly. The Shadowstalker was still dangerous and terrifying, but it no longer seemed completely confident. Sora looked between Ji-won and the creature, her empathic senses working overtime. The fear projection was definitely weaker now, but she was also picking up something new from the Shadowstalker. If she didn't know better, she would have said the creature was starting to feel nervous. "Professor," Yuna called from the back of the room. "Is the containment affecting the creature's behavior?" Professor Veltar checked all his instruments twice. "No, all systems are functioning normally. The creature is just settling down. Perhaps it's getting used to our presence." But the Shadowstalker wasn't settling down. It had backed away from the side of the container where Ji-won sat. Its aggressive posture was changing into something more defensive. The creature's tail stopped curving over its back and lowered to a more neutral position. Ji-won continued to watch the creature with calm interest. His notebook remained open, but he had stopped writing. His full attention was focused on the Shadowstalker, and the creature seemed to sense this attention in a way that made it uncomfortable. "The fear projection has almost stopped," Minho observed quietly. "I don't feel scared anymore." "Neither do I," Sora agreed. But her empathic abilities were telling her that while the student's fear was fading, the Shadowstalker itself was beginning to experience something very different. For the first time in its life, the perfect predator was starting to feel like prey. The demonstration was supposed to continue for another 30 minutes, but everyone in the room could sense that something unexpected was happening. The careful balance between predator and prey was shifting in a way that none of them understood, all except Ji-won, who continued to watch the creature with patient, unblinking eyes. The change in the Shadowstalker's behavior was gradual at first, but it became impossible to ignore. The creature had stopped its aggressive pacing and now stood completely still in the center of its container. Its glowing yellow eyes remained, fixed on one spot in the classroom, specifically on the human student sitting calmly in the third row. Professor Veltar noticed the change first. He had been explaining the creature's hunting patterns when he realized that the Shadowstalker was no longer demonstrating any of them. Instead, it was frozen in place like a statue. "This is unusual," the professor muttered, checking his instruments again. "All containment systems are functioning perfectly. The creature appears to be distracted." Yuna moved closer to get a better view. Her security training had taught her to recognize when dangerous situations were developing, and something about this scene made her nervous. The Shadowstalker was still contained, but its behavior was completely different from what the reports had described. Professor, Yuna called out. Maybe we should end the demonstration early. Nonsense, Professor Veltar replied. This is fascinating. The creature is exhibiting behavior that has never been documented before. The students were also noticing the change. The overwhelming fear that had filled the room was almost completely gone. Several students who had moved to the back of the classroom were now returning to their seats to get a better look. It's not scary anymore, said one student with relief. Why did it stop moving? Asked another. Hyon, with his logical mind, was analyzing the situation carefully. The creature's posture has changed from aggressive to defensive. Its fear projection has ceased entirely. This suggests that it perceives a threat in the environment. But what threat? Minho wondered aloud. We're all safely separated by the containment field. Sora's empathic abilities were giving her information that the others couldn't access. The emotional atmosphere in the room had completely reversed. Instead of the students feeling afraid of the creature, she was now sensing fear coming from the Shadow Stalker itself. It was a subtle emotion, carefully controlled, but it was definitely there. Something's wrong, she whispered to Minho. The creature is scared. Scared? That's impossible, Minho replied. It's the perfect predator. What could scare it? Sora didn't answer, but her eyes moved to Ji-won. The human sat perfectly still, his gaze locked on the Shadow Stalker. His breathing was slow and steady, and his posture was relaxed, but there was something different about him now. The controlled power that Sora had sensed before was now much closer to the surface. The Shadow Stalker took a small step backward, away from Ji-won's side of the container. It was such a subtle movement that most students didn't notice, but Professor Veltar saw it clearly. Remarkable, he breathed. The creature is displaying avoidance behavior. But there's nothing in its environment that should trigger this response. Ji-won slowly stood up from his seat. The movement was fluid and silent, like water flowing uphill. Every eye in the room turned to him, but his attention remained focused entirely on the creature. The effect on the Shadow Stalker was immediate and dramatic. The creature took several more steps backward until it was pressed against the far wall of its container. Its defensive posture became even more pronounced, and for the first time since the demonstration began, it broke eye contact with the potential target. Ji-won, Professor Veltar said sharply. Please sit down. You're affecting the creature's behavior. But Ji-won didn't sit down. Instead, he took a step toward the container, then another. His movements were careful and deliberate, like someone approaching a dangerous animal, or like a predator stalking prey. The Shadow Stalker pressed itself even harder against the back wall of its container. The creature that had terrified an entire classroom of students was now trying to make itself as small as possible. Its glowing eyes darted around its enclosure as if looking for an escape route. What's happening? Ryan asked, his voice filled with confusion. Why is it acting like that? Yuna's hand moved to her weapon. Her instincts were screaming that something was very wrong, even though she couldn't identify the threat. Professor, we need to stop this demonstration now. But this is unprecedented, Professor Veltar protested. We're witnessing behavior that could revolutionize our understanding of apex predators. Ji-won took another step closer to the container. He was now only 3 meters away from the containment field. The Shadow Stalker was making soft whimpering sounds like a frightened animal. Its tail was no longer poised to strike, but was instead tucked close to its body. Ji-won. What are you doing? Minho called out. He had never seen his friend act like this before. The human's usual calm friendliness had been replaced by something much more intense. Jiwon didn't answer. His eyes remained locked on the creature, and his expression was completely focused. There was no anger or aggression in his face, just pure, predatory concentration. It was the look of a hunter who had found interesting prey. Sora gasped as her empathic senses suddenly flooded with new information. The emotion she was picking up from Jiwon was unlike anything she had ever felt before. It wasn't human emotion as she understood it. It was something older, deeper, and infinitely more dangerous. "He's not human," she whispered, then caught herself. "I mean, he is human, but humans aren't what we thought they were." The Shadow Stalker was now making submissive postures, lowering, its head and backing away as far as the container would allow. The perfect killing machine was behaving like prey in the presence of an even more perfect predator. Professor Veltar frantically checked his xenobiology database, searching for any reference to this kind of behavior. "This is impossible," he muttered. "Shadowstalkers don't have natural predators. They're apex predators. They don't submit to anything." Jiwon placed his hand against the containment field. The energy barrier hummed between his palm and the transparent wall of the container. The Shadow Stalker flinched away from his touch, even though the field prevented any physical contact. "Fascinating," Jiwon said quietly, speaking for the first time since he had stood up. His voice was still calm and friendly, but there was an undertone that made several students shiver. "It recognizes what I am." "What you are?" Professor Veltar demanded. "You're human. You're from a Class 7 civilization on a minor world in the outer spiral." Jiwon smiled, but it wasn't his usual warm expression. This smile showed too many teeth and didn't reach his eyes. "Earth isn't a minor world, Professor. It's a death world. And humans aren't a Class 7 civilization. We're the apex predators from a planet where everything else is also trying to kill you." The classroom fell silent except for the hum of the containment field and the soft whimpering sounds from the Shadow Stalker. Every student was staring at Jiwon with new understanding and growing fear. Hion's crystal skin was cycling through colors rapidly as he processed this information. The classification data must be incorrect. If humans are apex predators from a death world, then our entire understanding of their species is wrong. "Very wrong," Jiwon agreed. He moved his hand along the containment field, and the Shadow Stalker followed his movement with terrified eyes, staying as far away as possible. "This creature has never encountered anything like me before, but its instincts know exactly what I am." Yuna stepped forward, her weapon now drawn but not aimed. "Stay where you are, human. Don't move any closer to the container." Jiwon looked at her with mild amusement. "I'm not going to hurt it. I'm just observing. Isn't that what we're here for?" "You're scaring it," Sora said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Jiwon replied simply. "It's scared because it recognizes a superior predator. On Earth, we call this the uncanny valley effect. When something looks almost right but isn't quite right, it triggers fear in prey animals. This creature sees something in me that its evolution has trained it to avoid." The Shadow Stalker had stopped whimpering and was now completely silent. It remained pressed against the back wall of its container, watching Jiwon with the fixed attention of prey that knows it has been seen by a predator. Professor Veltar was rapidly taking notes and recording everything. "This changes everything we know about human classification," he said excitedly. "We need to update all the databases immediately." But most of the students were no longer thinking about academic classifications. They were looking at their human classmate with new eyes, seeing not the friendly exchange student they thought they knew, but something much more dangerous that had been hiding in plain sight. The demonstration was supposed to show them what a perfect predator looked like. Instead, it had revealed that they had been sitting next to one all along. The silence in the classroom stretched for long moments. Everyone stared at Ji-won, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The human looked exactly the same as he had when he first arrived at the academy, but everything about how they perceived him had changed completely. Professor Veltar was the first to speak. "I demand an explanation," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "The registration data clearly states that humans are a peaceful species from a low-danger world." Ji-won turned away from the container, leaving his hand pressed against the containment field for a moment longer. The Shadow Stalker remained frozen against the back wall, not daring to move while the human's attention was on it. "The data is wrong," Ji-won said simply. "Humans have been exploring space for less than 200 years. Most of the information in your databases comes from our first contact protocols, which were designed to make us seem as harmless as possible." Yuna kept her weapon ready, but not aimed. Her security training told her that Ji-won was dangerous, but he hadn't actually done anything threatening. "Are you saying your species has been lying to the Galactic Council?" "Not lying," Ji-won corrected. "Just not telling the whole truth. When you meet new neighbors, you don't usually start by explaining how good you are at killing things." Minho looked confused and hurt. "But you're my friend. You helped me with my homework. You shared your food with everyone." Ji-won's expression softened, and for a moment he looked like the friendly student they had known. "I am your friend, Minho. Humans are social creatures. We form strong bonds with our pack members, but being social doesn't make us less dangerous." "Pack members?" Hyen's crystal skin flickered with analytical colors. "You're referring to social hunting behavior." "Exactly," Ji-won nodded. "Humans are persistence hunters. We developed cooperation not despite being predators, but because we are predators. Working together makes us more efficient killers." Sora shuddered as her empathic senses picked up more details about Ji-won's emotional state. "You're not upset about scaring us. You're calm about it." "Why would I be upset?" Ji-won asked genuinely. "This is what I am. On Earth, there are creatures much more dangerous than that Shadow Stalker. We live alongside them every day. We had to become apex predators just to survive." Professor Veltar frantically accessed his databases. "But Earth is classified as a Class 3 world with moderate dangers. Standard atmospheric composition, stable climate, diverse but manageable wildlife." Ji-won laughed, and the sound made several students step backward. "Moderate dangers? Professor, let me tell you about moderate Earth dangers. We have snakes whose bite can kill you in 20 minutes. Spiders smaller than your thumb that can put you in a coma. Fish in our oceans that can swallow a shuttle whole. Plants that can blind you just by touching them." "That's impossible," Ryan protested. "No species could evolve on a world that hostile." "That's where you're wrong," Ji-won continued. "We didn't just evolve on that world. We conquered it. Humans wiped out most of the large predators that competed with us. We made tools that could kill anything we encountered. We learned to cooperate so well that we could hunt creatures 10 times our size." He gestured toward the Shadow Stalker, which was still cowering in its container. "This creature hunts by making its prey feel afraid. But humans have been afraid for so long that we've learned to function perfectly while terrified. Fear doesn't stop us anymore. It just makes us more focused. Day, who had been quietly observing from the back of the room, stepped forward. The medical scans make sense now. Your low heart rate, fast reflexes, efficient metabolism. These aren't normal human traits. They're predator adaptations. Every human has them, Ji-won confirmed. We just don't talk about them much. Would you trust a species that casually mentioned they were designed for hunting? Yuna was rapidly updating her threat assessment. How dangerous are humans, really? Ji-won considered the question seriously. On Earth, we're the undisputed apex predator. Nothing hunts humans except other humans. We've spread to every environment on the planet, from frozen wastelands to burning deserts. We've made tools that can destroy entire continents. And we did all of this while still in our Stone Age. But you seem so normal, Minho said weakly. That's another adaptation, Ji-won explained. The most successful predators are the ones that don't look dangerous until it's too late. Humans learn to appear harmless to other humans, which makes us very good at appearing harmless to other species. Professor Veltar was taking notes as fast as his 4 arms could move. This explains so much about human behavior. Your curiosity about other species, your adaptability, your rapid technological development. We're explorers because we're hunters, Ji-won agreed. Every human who leaves Earth is looking for new challenges, new environments to master, new problems to solve. It's what we do. Behind them, the shadow stalker made a soft sound. Everyone turned to look at the creature, which was still pressed against the back of its container. When Ji-won glanced at it, the creature immediately became silent again. It's still afraid of you, Sora observed. It should be, Ji-won said matter-of-factly. Its species evolved to be the perfect predator on its world, but it never had to compete with anything like humans. We're something new in its experience. He walked closer to the container again, and the shadow stalker tried to make itself even smaller. On Earth, this creature would be considered moderately dangerous, impressive, but not unique. We have animals that are bigger, faster, more venomous, or smarter. Some are all of those things at once. And humans survived among creatures like that? Hyon asked. We didn't just survive, Ji-won corrected. We thrived. We became the dominant species on a planet where everything else was trying to kill us. Do you know what we call a world like that? A death world, Yuna said quietly. No. Ji-won smiled that predatory smile again. We call it home. The room fell silent again as everyone processed this information. Their friendly human classmate was a member of a species of apex predators from a world so dangerous that it would be classified as uninhabitable by most galactic standards. Professor Veltar finally found his voice. We need to update our files on human classification immediately. This changes everything about how we interact with your species. Does it? Ji-won asked, his expression returning to its usual friendliness. I'm still the same person I was an hour ago. I still want to learn about other cultures. I still want to make friends. I still need help with quantum mechanics homework. But you're a predator, Sora said, her voice small. So is that creature. Ji-won pointed at the shadow stalker. So are most species, in their own way. The only difference is that humans got very good at it. Minho looked at his friend with new understanding. Is this why you're so calm all the time? Because you're not really afraid of anything? I'm afraid of plenty of things, Ji-won said honestly. I'm afraid of failing my classes. I'm afraid of disappointing my parents. I'm afraid that knowing what I am will make all of you afraid of me. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Despite everything they had learned, Ji-won was still the same person they had befriended. "We're not afraid of you," Minho said, though his voice was uncertain. "You should be, at least a little," Ji-won replied gently. "Healthy fear keeps people alive. But being afraid doesn't mean we can't be friends. It just means you understand what I am." Yuna holstered her weapon. "What happens now?" "Now I finish my education," Ji-won said simply. "I learn about other species, other worlds, other ways of thinking. Maybe I can help bridge the gap between humans and the rest of the galaxy." "And the classification data?" Professor Veltar asked. "Will be updated gradually," Ji-won said. "Humanity is starting to share more information about our true nature. But it's a slow process. Most species need time to adjust to the idea that their new neighbors are apex predators." He looked around the room at all the faces staring at him. "I hope this doesn't change our friendships. I really do want to learn from all of you. And maybe I can teach you something about survival, adaptation, and what it means to be human." Ryan raised his hand tentatively. "Can you teach us how to not be afraid?" Ji-won smiled, and this time it was his normal warm expression. "I can teach you how to function while afraid. That's the most human skill of all." As the class ended, students filed out slowly, whispering among themselves. The Shadow Stalker remained motionless in its container until Ji-won was completely out of sight, then finally began to move again. Professor Veltar made a note in his files. "Recommend immediate reclassification of human species. Previous data, grossly inaccurate. Humans are apex predators from extreme environment world. Approach with appropriate caution and respect." In the hallway, Sora caught up with Ji-won. "Will you still sit with us at lunch?" "If you want me to," Ji-won replied. "We do," Minho said, joining them. "You're still our friend. Just a much more dangerous friend than we thought." Ji-won laughed, and for the first time since the demonstration began, it was a completely human sound. "Welcome to the galaxy, everyone. I hope you're ready for what comes next." As they walked toward the food court together, Ji-won sent a message to his family on Earth. "First week of class is going well. Made some good friends. They're starting to understand what humans are really like. I think they can handle the truth. Galaxy seems ready for us after all.